with the JP way, and you don't want to miss this life. Today, we will be going over hand placement on the crossfader and why it makes the most sense in terms of making scratching the easiest, especially between different scratch techniques. We'll also be touching on hand placement on your jog wheels or your platter or turntables. And with that said, let's hop right into it. All right, DJs. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is set your curve all the way to the right, which is also known as fast. And this is the proper way to set your mixer or your setting for scratching. Now, some mixers have this directly on the mixer. If not, you can go ahead and take a look in Serato or whatever your software is. In Serato, you just click this settings button right here. Then we're going to go over to mixer. And because mine is actually on the mixer, it's controllable only by the mixer. But if you don't have this on your mixer, you can actually pull this from slow to fast. So just make sure that you have this set all the way to fast. Next, we're going to talk about hand placement on the crossfader. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you a chirp scratch, which looks just like this. I have my Serato scratch on my left deck. Go ahead and download that if you don't have it already. It'll be in the description. And then this is exactly what a chirp scratch is going to look like. Now to talk about the actual hand placement on the crossfader. What I find personally easiest for me is having my middle finger on the right hand side and then having my thumb on the left hand side. And what I pretty much do for my chirp scratch is I'll start with it open. So when I push my record on my platter forward, I like to push with my thumb to close it, and then I like to push back with my middle finger to open it. So it looks just like this. And of course, that's a little bit dramatic. So in more real speed. Now, if it's easier for you to actually hold onto the crossfader, that is also an option. But as I said, I find it easiest to just push back and forth. And you want to be doing this pretty lightly. You don't have to ever hold onto your crossfader super hard or super stern. You should be pretty light on it. Honestly, you should be able to go like this, just back and forth between your thumb and your middle finger, just showing you how lightly I'm pretty much holding it, just pushing that back and forth. And again, the motion is just like this, pushing with the thumb and back with the middle finger. And the reason that I do it this particular way is because it sets you up for other scratches perfectly. So the one-click flare orbit, I'm just going to do some chirp scratches in the one-click flare orbit, and you'll understand exactly what I mean. Now, I'm not going to be going over the one-click flare orbit in this particular video, but as you can see, as I'm going back and forth, it's just a natural, smooth transition from the chirp scratch straight into the orbit, using that same method of just pushing with the thumb, pushing back with the middle finger. Now, the next thing that you want to remember is that when you're doing a chirp scratch, especially when you're in full speed, like if you're in the middle of a mix, it's very easy to push this crossfader too far over and you actually end up cutting the other sound out. So if you're going really fast, it might look like this. And you don't want this crossfader to ever come completely on the other side, because if you have a song playing on this deck, then it'll actually cut that song out completely. So while you're practicing the chirp scratch, and any scratch for that matter, make sure that when you're holding this lightly, you're only pushing lightly enough to come back to the middle. Try to come only back to the middle. If you have to, you can come a little bit past the middle, but definitely be conscious of that when you're doing your chirp scratches. Everything that you're doing on the crossfader, you want to just be light and nimble. Very, very light. Now to move on and talk a little bit about hand placement on the actual platter. What I find myself doing the most is having my hand directly at 9 o'clock or a little bit above 9 o'clock, so around 10 o'clock. So I'm either right here or a little bit farther up when I'm holding my platter. You don't really want to have your hand too low, because it's just like an unnatural way to come this far back and then go forward. To me, this just feels really unnatural. If you're too high, that's also kind of unnatural. You're kind of extending your arm out too far. You don't want to be doing too much motion with your arm. You honestly want to keep it, a lot of scratching is like really in your wrist and a little bit of hand movement, but you don't want your arm too heavily involved. As you can see, when I'm here, it just takes too much of my arm movement to kind of do this back and forth, as well as up here, too much arm movement. But when I'm right at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or somewhere in between there, you can see that I'm able to move my arm just slightly, and it's more so in your wrist. And that's another thing to remember. A lot of scratching is in your wrist. You want to be holding your platter really lightly. I'm usually using 2 fingers, sometimes even 1 finger if I'm doing a scribble scratch, which is simply this. If I'm doing a scribble scratch or just quick chirp scratches, I usually have 1 or 2 fingers on the platter, holding it very lightly as possible. And I like to be right in this area, 9 and 10 o'clock, going back and forth, mostly wrist action. Also, using that wrist action will just give you the ability to be the fastest. If you're using your entire arm, it just slows down your speed dramatically than if you're just using your wrist to go back and forth. And then lastly, for your transformer scratch, which is going to look and sound just like this. So as you can see with the transformer scratch, it's a very similar way that I'm holding the crossfader, except now my thumb is just more heavily on the left side of the crossfader, and I'm just using my middle finger to push this to actually make my sounds. So to make a simple sound like this, you can see it's that same thing. Closing, pushing twice, closing, pushing twice. The only difference between that is when you're doing, for instance, a chirp scratch, you're actually pushing back and forth and you don't have your thumb heavily on the left hand side. So a chirp is like this, and the transformer would be more like this. All right, DJs, I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial on your hand placement for the crossfader, as well as platters and jog wheels. And this video was really just made to show you how I personally scratch using the crossfader and my personal placement on platters or jog wheels. So if you have something that works better, please drop it in the comment section. It might be of help to others, but this is what I have found works best for me, and I hope it also works for you. Also, if you have any ideas or videos for me, please drop those in the comment section as well. I definitely try to get those. I have a few lined up, so if you have dropped a comment, please believe I will get to your video. As time goes on, I'll definitely get to it. So without further ado, that's all I got for you. Until the next video, catch y'all later.